Okay, so I think it's recording, and I'm hoping that today is not going to be such a big deal. So what I'm going to do here is I know that last time I was trying to explain Ajax, and I was having a bit of issue, especially with course or cross origin request sharing, which basically is a browser feature that prevents you from sharing data across browsers, especially if you're not running from the same server. So I've decided to take a different approach and show us exactly how we can be able to how we'll be able to share this data back and forth without necessarily having this cause issue. So maybe what you could do is first of all, I would like you to download something called XAMPP or XAMPP. So you open your browser, then you go to XAMPP.
Are you sharing?
Oh, sorry, I'm not sharing my screen yet.
Yeah, not yet.
Telling you.
Hmm?
I hope that's now visible.
Coming up? Yes.
So I said the first thing we're going to do today, we want to do Ajax, and we want to see what Ajax is all about. And the things I want us to do today is first of all to download and install XAMPP so that we have a local web server running. So that now, when we're trying to get data back and forth, we don't have the issue of course or cross origin request sharing. So you just go to Google and type XAMPP and say download XAMPP. You're going to download it from Apache Friends. You can download based on your version of Windows. Yeah, the current version of PHP is version 8.0.3. You can download this particular bit. Then, of course, you will install it. Installing it is self-explanatory because it's just a matter of clicking next, 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 next until you're done. So basically, that's what you will need to do. But again, we are going to look at this in detail. So I'm not expecting you to be able to run this effectively. Of course, I'm expecting that you'll be consuming APIs that have been written so that you're not just able to get the tool. So that's what I installed for purposes of allowing me to be able to demonstrate how Ajax rather works. So if you come back to our presentation, we discussed Ajax. We said Ajax is asynchronous JavaScript and XML. So basically, it's a technique that we use over the internet to send and receive data from what we call remote storages or even other applications. So basically, it's a medium of exchange, and the data that is exchanged here would be mostly XML and JSON. But I prefer using JSON most of the time, though there's some people who are comfortable with XML, but I prefer JSON most of the time. It's a much easier structure. So I think we'll go straight to how this is going to work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a new folder. So going to create a new folder inside C. When you install XAMPP, you go to C, then you go to a folder called XAMPP, then you go to a folder called htdocs. This is where you're going to create your application. So what I'm going to do here, I'm going to create an application here called uh, jQuery Ajax. So this is where I'm going to store all my files, right? So jQuery Ajax. So on this jQuery Ajax, this is where I'm going to put all my files. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go to File. I'll come to Open Folder. Then I'll come to C, XAMPP, htdocs. Then I'll come to, I think I call it jQuery Ajax here. So this is where I would want to store my file. So here, I just create a file called index.php. So index.php. Don't worry, you're going to look at PHP in detail. So this shouldn't worry you so much. Even though it has the extension .php, I'm going to write regular HTML here. Okay? And I'm going to write here my JavaScript. So basically, what I'm trying to do is just to get rid of the cross-origin request sharing error, where now I'm not able to use my local data to be able to demonstrate for you exactly how Ajax works. So here, let's say, for example, I have some APIs that I've created over here. For example, I have a local server here. It's called localhost. So I have a server here. that I can be able to get different inventories. So when I run this, you're able to see, sorry, it's not HTTPS, it's HTTP. When I have this local server over here, you can see I'm able to get this data. This is a JSON data. You can see it's an array of objects. So I have the first object ending, where is it ending? Well, I don't know where it's ending, but it will probably end somewhere. Then I have another object and so forth and so forth. So I have consumables and I have fixed assets. So probably consumables are ending at the back somewhere here. Yeah, actually consumable ends here. That's consumables. Then this other one is fixed assets. So you can be able to see I have an array of objects. So this is actually a JSON. Is actually a JSON object. So let's see how we can be able to use this. So remember we said for us to use Ajax, there are some three parameters that we need to use. So here, I'll introduce jQuery here. So let me copy and paste jQuery in this folder so that it's easier for me to be able to reach it. I think I have jQuery in most of these applications. So uh, 3.7.1 jQuery under JS. jQuery. This is 2.2.4. Let me get something that is slightly newer. Uh, which application did I do the most recent? That should have version of jQuery. I'm not sure what this one has, but I think I put them under plugins. Yeah, this is jQuery 3.6.1, which is actually awesome. So I'll pick this. I'll come to my jQuery Ajax and I'll paste it here. So I have jQuery. So when I come back to my source code, I have jQuery here. So what we do here is, remember we said to introduce jQuery, we'll use script, and the source here is jQuery. I don't know why it's not picking. Hyphen 3.6.1 .js should have picked. Then I can introduce now my script. Sorry, script with a source, and I'll pick this one index.js. Then inside this index.js, I'll simply say when the document is ready, run the following callback function. The code is all about callbacks. So I can simply say here console.log jQuery is running, right? Running. So I'll just test this to see if it's running. So what I'll do is I'll open a browser window. I'll open localhost. Then I'll open jQuery. What did I call the folder?
Ajax.
jQuery Ajax. I don't need to say index.php because it will pick index.php. I can see the file is there. So when I inspect, I should see on the console jQuery is running. So that's perfect. So that's the scenario that I wanted to be at. So I have my local server running, so I can be able to test my APIs locally without any restrictions. So as we're looking at other examples the other time. We had some URLs where you could be able to get some data and be able to display this data, and we saw that they were actually working very well from remote servers. It's our local server that was not working. So now that you know jQuery is working, not a big deal. We can test Ajax, and we said for us to fetch remote data, so you can fetch remote data using Ajax request, and we say it is jQuery.ajax. And with jQuery.ajax, you pass an object. So within that object, the first element you have is the URL where you want to go. The next element is the method, and the third element, which is optional, is method is either get, post, put, delete, but mostly we'll use get and post. Mostly, it's more than enough, right? Then the third one is the data type. is the data type. Actually, you don't need these brackets for the for the for the keys. So here you have the data type. So the data type here can be JSON, it can be a string. Then you also have optionally the data that you're sending over, which can be an object, which you would stringify definitely. Then you have the success callback. So you have the success callback over here, which will give you the data that comes back from your process. Then the last option is the error callback. So this error callback will now give you the error that was gotten. Of course, it should be an XHR object followed by the error itself and maybe the error code and stuff like that. So this is generally the syntax of an AJAX request, but you don't need everything over here. Most of the time, I would need the data type because mostly I might want to return the data as a string, so might not need the data type as a JSON object. But if I want it to be exclusively JSON, then I'll specify JSON. So let's see how we'll be able to use this. Uh, I have some URLs that I was testing here before. Like I think I have this. I think I have, where is it? Yeah, I think I have this request. So if I have something like this request over here, I'll put this URL and I'll say the URL is that. So I'll pick that particular URL and I'll say I want to get the data. When I say post, of course, we explain the difference between get and post. When you say get, it means that everything is sent as part of the URL. But when you use post, it means that data is appended as a form object or something like that. Then we have the JSON, which means the data we're returning is JSON. This data is used when you want to send over data to the server. At the moment, I don't want to send any data, so I'll mask that. Then I have the success callback over here. I don't want to send any errors. I don't want to respond to any errors. So I will stick with these objects. So here I could simply say console.log to see if it actually gives me back this data. So when I say console.log and I run this particular application over here, it will fetch and you can see the data is actually here. Let's just do something meaningful with this data and place it on the screen over here just to make sense out of it. Remember we said that once you get this data, because it has come as a JSON object, by the way, I can opt to leave this one out, and it's also possible to get the response as a string. So if I don't do that, and I run it, and the server returns a string, then I'll be able to see that data as a string. So in this particular case, because the data comes back as a JSON object, I'll be able to see it's still a JSON object even without specifying the data type that I'm expecting to return. But as I said, usually when you expect to return JSON, make sure it is JSON so that when it is not formatted as JSON, then you get an error and you can be able to respond to that error down here. Okay, so you can tell the user the data that was returned uh, is not to what you expected. So then, at that particular case, they know that actually something happened to that particular request. So I'll leave that out for now to avoid complications. So let's make use of this data. So maybe what I could do here, I could declare a variable called results and assign it to blank. Then maybe what I can do is I can look through all the data that has come from the JSON object, the JSON request, the AJAX request, then be able to display the content on the screen. Now, I don't know what it looks like, but let me just go back to the browser window, and I'm seeing it's an object that contains email, gender, ID, name, and status. So let's say we want to create a table with this data, and I want to display these things as a table. So what I'm going to do here, I'm simply going to say data because it's an array of objects. I'll say data dot for each. Now you can use for each, which is what I like, but you can also use a for loop. So you can say for let I equals 0, I less than data dot length, then increment I. This is an option. Then you can also have that. You can use that to because again this is an array of objects. So I just start at object 0. So I'll simply say here data I. So I could simply say here console.log data I. So it means it will dump all those records as different rows. So that's just an example. Let's just run that and see how it works out. Again, do that. As you can see now, it picks them as individual rows. So they are dumped as individual rows from the top to the bottom. So that's one way of doing it, but I don't like using a for loop like this. So what I prefer using is something like data dot for each. So for each, of course, will allow me to pass a function, which is an anonymous function like this. And of course, here I'll talk about the user who we are working with. Then from the user, I can now be able to manage that user. So here I can simply say console.log now user. So you can see now I don't need to refer to the actual index of the data. I simply refer to the object that you're looping through. So as you're looping through each object, I'm getting a single object, then I'm working on that particular object that I'm currently on within the loop. So we run that. I think we should end up with the same results. You shouldn't see anything different. Yes, you can see it's exactly the same thing, and that's much better. If you ask me, if in my opinion, this one works much better for me. So I like using this kind of approach. Now that we have a user and we want to create a table, let's simply say uh, uh, the results here would be results. I want to add, create a table row, then create a table division. Then within the table division, this is what we are calling template string. So I don't want to use pluses and minuses. I just want to use a template string so that I'm able to join regular text with variables so that now my code becomes a little bit neater to work with. And this is the approach that you're going to be taking most of the time when you are working with Ajax and probably even JSON requests or the fetch API. So you can either use Ajax or you can use fetch API, whichever is convenient for you. But of course, I prefer to use Ajax, and I'm going to show you why in just a few minutes. So here I want to display first of all the ID, the name, email, gender, and status. ID. So let me just comment it here. ID, name, email, gender, and status. Okay, and those are the field names I believe. So here I'll simply put user dot id, and I'll cross that that particular table division. Then I want to create another table division, and here I want to create user dot name. Of course, it's a template string, so for the variables you start with the dollar sign, then curly bracket. So user dot name. Then I cross the table division. Then I start another table division. This is now I'm composing HTML. No, may not be a good practice, but it works. For now, we'll use it as is. Probably, maybe in future, you can see different methods of creating these nodes besides just appending them as regular HTML. But for now, let's just use this particular approach. So for the email, I'll simply again dollar sign user dot email, and the fields needs to be there by the way. So I'll close that rather. Then create another table division, which is now my gender. So I'll say here user dot gender. Then probably close that table division, start another table division, and then I simply put um, the last variable, which is user dot status. Then when I'm done, I simply close the table division and I close the table row. So what I'm doing here, I'm creating a row with 6 divisions. So probably maybe what I might want to do is to serialize these items 1, 2, 3, 4 so that I know how many they are. Every time we're using a for each loop, then we are given both an element and its index. So the index will be passed here as I. So I can use the index there. So probably I can add here another TD, then close this TD. Then here I'll put my I, which signals my counter. So I like that. The only problem is these are zero-based index, so it will start as 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. But let's see how that works out before I correct that, then we can be able to correct it. Now, once I'm done, I can simply, well, because result is a table, I can simply say this is a table here. Then this table, I want to have a table header. Then this table header, table head. This is HTML. This is semantics. So I have, I think I have 6 columns. One, two, three, four, five. Yeah, there are six. So I have th.
No, six
Uh,
because of I.
yes,
Six because of
the I. Yes, there are six because
I.
of the I. So I'll have one, and by then let me use a template string to make it easier to read. With a template string, the good thing is that you can actually write it like regular HTML like that. Okay, so that's one, two, three, four, five, and six. So this one contains the number. This one contains the ID.
ID.
This is the name. I can put ID here in caps. This contains the email, gender, and of course status. Right? So once that is done, then I'm going to put up a T body. I'm going to close the head, of course. Then I'm going to put a body for the table. And then after the body, I'm going to put these results. Then I'm going to come down here and I'll add the results to, now I'll close the T body. Then once I'm done, I'll close the table. Simple, right? Actually, I can put these ones in one line, not a big deal. They're not that complicated. So that means I'll create a table with a header containing 6 headings. Then I create a body. Then I get my data from the URL, the data that comes from the URL, look through the data as I generate rows. Then once I'm done, I'll simply close the body and I'll close the table. Then I want to dump this data on the page. So I'll simply say um, document get the body tag, then convert the HTML to the results. So simply take the entire document, then look for the body tag, then inside the body tag, the HTML that goes inside there, put the results, which is basically what you have generated here. Okay, let's see how that works out, or if that works out. I'll refresh this. It will fetch, get the data, and you can see I've actually created a table on the same. The only problem I have here is that this is 0, 1, 2. This is what I was saying. Okay, it starts at 0, but I wanted to start at 1. So because arrays are zero-based index, and I'm starting at I, I'll simply say I plus 1. Now that can become a problem in JavaScript, as you can see. It might not work mathematically, or it could. So here we're lucky it has worked, but sometimes it doesn't. So to be on the safe side, I simply want to convert this one to a number so that now it is able to treat it as an actual number and not necessarily a string. JavaScript is very notorious with that. So you can see we are actually able to extract that data and be able to use it. Now we can do so many things with this data. We can filter it, we can sort it, we can do all sort of things. We learned how to use high order functions, which were filter, sort, and map, and reduce, and so forth and so forth. I hope you can remember. For now, I'm not going to focus on that because I want to focus on Ajax. But if I got this data and I wanted to arrange them by maybe gender, or maybe by email, or by name, or by ID, and so forth and so forth, I would actually be able to achieve that. So this is an example of how we would use the Ajax method to be able to fetch remote data. Any question up to that point? I've just used a regular, specific example to demonstrate to us when we have the data, how we can actually make use of it inside JavaScript or jQuery for that particular matter.
I see we have skipped some things there.
Like which one?
Like we have leapfrogged.
Okay.
We have used PHP, which we are yet
No, we have
to
not used PHP yet. I've only given the extension
learn,
of
and we have also used
Eliud. I have not used PHP yet. I've only what I've done is what I have done is
okay,
because we were having the cross origin request sharing issue. I'm trying to create a local
okay,
server
okay,
that I can now be able to share data to and
okay.
from without that uh, uh, cross-site request sharing issue, the cost issue. The cost issue is what I'm trying to get around. But we have not touched PHP yet. As you can see, this file has an extension of .php.
Mm.
Yes, but what I've written here is pure HTML and
There's no more
pure
HTML.
JavaScript.
Okay, then number two,
Yes.
the URL, you had already created some data, which I
Yeah,
assume
this URL,
the.
if you pick this URL and you paste it anywhere, it will give you the exact
Mm,
same data. Even if you paste it on your machine,
okay,
it will give you the exact same data, as you can see. It gives you that data, okay? So
okay.
this is what you're calling a REST
Mm,
API. So when you do your REST APIs, they'll be giving you data in form of JSON, and most of the time, that's what you want.
okay,
Yes. So I just want you to focus on when we're looking at Ajax, we're looking at asynchronous JavaScript and XML. So asynchronous means it will fetch the data. Once it finishes fetching the data, then we can work with the data. As you can be able to see, I don't know how long it's going to take to fetch the data, but the success callback here, this portion will be called only after the data has been returned. So I don't know how long it will take to read data from this URL. Once the data is gotten, then it will be able to execute this portion of the code, which is a success callback. Okay, and that's why we're saying it's called Ajax
okay.
asynchronous. It will only execute this particular portion after it has finished extracting the data.
Is it the best practice?
Richard,
That is the best practice.
Richard.
Okay.
Now we can use
Mr. Jero is
promises. We can
calling.
use by the way,
Mr. Jero.
jQuery is asynchronous, so it might not do things the way you want them to do in the order that you want them done. But when you contain your uh, uh, requests inside success callbacks, then they are only executed after that request callback has been completed successfully. Of course, sometimes you might have data, the URL might not be found, for example, so it will return a 404. But of course, you can respond to those ones using the error callback. We're going to look at those ones later and how to handle them. Okay? Now, this was
So,
quite.
Mr. Jero was asking a question.
Go ahead.
yes, Richard.
Yes, yes, Jero.
So if I'm running Zamp,
Mm-hmm.
I need to run what so that I cannot see clearly where I am,
Okay.
but I think I'm following. But
What?
there's this URL.
Mm-hmm.
So I run it directly on the server. That is the Zamp.
Now, I don't want you to confuse a few things here and there.
Yes.
Why I ran XAMPP, and you can see
Yeah.
whatever I've done here has got totally nothing to do with XAMPP, with the
Okay.
exception of
Uh-huh.
executing the page as a local server. Okay,
Okay.
that's the only thing that I've done. But every other thing I have done is what we have been doing before, which is JavaScript and
Okay.
HTML. And of course,
HTML.
I've not done any CSS here. So clearly, for now, let's leave it at that. But what I was trying to come across here is when I have XAMPP installed, I create what we call a local server. Then inside that local server, there is this folder called htdocs. If you go to C XAMPP htdocs, that's where your files are going to be located. So from here, I created a folder called jQuery Ajax. Then inside that folder is where I put all my files together. So if I wanted to test this from a local server, I open my browser, I type localhost with the name of the folder where my project is located. Now that will open index.php. By default, index.php. If you have HTML, it will open index.html. If you have ASP, it will open index.asp. So whatever extension you have, it will look for the word index with the extension that is required. In this particular case, since I'm using PHP, it will look for index.php. Now, in this index.php is where I have written my logic. So in index.php, I've just written a normal PHP object. Then I've appended jQuery and the index.js script, which is here. And at the index.js script, then I've told it when jQuery is ready, then get me data from this URL, and it's a get method, and I want it to be JSON. Then, if you are successful, execute the following code, which means generate a table. Then, for each record that has been returned, look through each record and create a row, and for each column, create a column. Then append those ones on results. Then, once you're done, go to the document, look for the body, then change the body's contents to results. That's basically what I have done. I hope it makes sense. Jeru,
Sure.
kama ushikanishi utasema
Ni sawa.
I will use simple examples, don't worry. I'm going to use simple examples, so I think that will be more understandable, okay?
Okay.
Basically here what I was trying to do is how you would access some remote data using Ajax, okay? Now I can compile this, I can collapse this. Now let's get our local data. So here on my local server, I have some local data. This is my local server. As you can see, this is my local host. This is my local server. I have a folder called rentwise, and inside rentwise, I have some controller. Then inside some controller, there is some operations that I can be able to do. So I don't want you to focus on how this is constructed. I want you to focus on the data that is being returned. We're going to see at how we will handle this later on. Okay. So don't focus on this URL. I want you to focus on the result itself. Okay. So if I pick this URL over here, and I say, so here I want to get local data. This is data on my computer. So I'll simply say jQuery dot Ajax. We said Ajax requires an object. The object has a URL, which is the first parameter. So I'll put my URL over here. Then after the URL, we have the method. In this particular case, I want to use get. And after the method, we have the success callback. So from success callback, I want to run, I'll get some data. Then I want to run through that data. Now I know what that data looks like. I can dump it on the screen. So what I can do is I can comment this so that it doesn't interfere with my output. Then here I can simply say console.log, log the data that has come, right? So I'll come to my browser over here. I'll open my console over here. I'll run this, and you can be able to see it has actually given me these results, similar to what I would have gotten from a remote server. So let's move through this data. By the way, if you wanted to see what that data looks like, you can come to network, then you can come to this file over here, then you come to response, and maybe you can get the preview, then you'll be able to see the different items that have been gotten from that data. You can see it has been added by 5. This is the added by name, when it was added, the type ID, and the type name. So that's the object that comes. And I have multiple objects, as you can see here. I have now the multiple objects that have come in. So let's see how we can work with this data. So assuming we want to get the first element, you can see this is index 0, index 1, and so forth and so forth. And mostly when you're working with your data, as I even demonstrated on Postman over here, you'll see that your data comes in indexes. That's index 0, index 1, sorry, index 2, all the way to index n, depending on how many records are actually there. So since we have this data, let's output this data on the screen. So here I could simply say data dot for each. Then I'll run a callback function here. Then the callback function will now pick an item. So here I'll simply say the type that has been returned. I can get the index. Then from there, I can now execute a function. So here, I can declare a results variable over here. So let results equals to that. So what I could do here is probably say for each of the types, I want to create a div. So I'll simply say results plus equals to. Then I use a template string. Then I'll say create a div. Then within each div, I want you to output, sorry, the type ID and the type name. So I'll simply say here type dot ID, then put a space, then dollar sign, uh, type dot name. Maybe if I want the index, I can come and put the index here, which is I plus 1. And probably I said the best approach is to convert this one into a number, like that. Number is lowercase u. Then once I'm done, I'll close that div, and it will go to the next div and so forth and so forth. So once that is done, I can simply come to my document and simply say from the document, get the body, and convert the content of the body to my results like that. So basically, it will go to my local server. It will get inventory types. It will return as a JSON object. Of course, I can say type here is JSON. So I can say data type equals JSON, lowercase JSON, like that. Then the success callback. So that will return not equal to but full column, like that, sorry. Yeah. Then that should be able to return that data. Let's run that and see how it works out. So if I run that, you can be able to, okay, it's undefined because I did not specify mm, type.id, type.name. Do they have type.id and type.name? Let me just, it's type ID and the category name. No, no, that's not it. Let me just get the data right. Where's the browser window? And this is how you debug, by the way. So I'll come to the network over here. I'll get this. Then it is type ID and type name. So you can see I have type ID and type name. So I just refresh those ones. It is type ID and type name. So I'll refresh this. And you can see one is ID5 consumables, two is ID4 fixed assets, and I can go on until I am done. Okay? That's a much simple example. The whole point is I'm just trying to demonstrate once we get the data, we can now play with it as much as we like. We can create divs, we can create table rows, we can create table divisions, we can create paragraphs. We can really create any HTML tag that we would like, depending on what kind of data we want to be able to return. Are you together at that point? Are we together?
Tuko pamoja.
Excellent. So now that is how to use Ajax. Of course, I'll explain on these notes how that works. That works out. Then we have shorthand methods for getting this data. Let me use the get shorthand so you see how it works. Okay. So for the get method, again, as you can see on my notes over here, it is basically get. I'll get the URL, then I'll get the callback. As simple as that. Okay. Let's replace this with get. So instead of using Ajax, I can simply say jQuery.get. Now, in this particular case, I'm not going to use an object, but rather get only has two parameters, the URL and the success callback, right? So I'll pick the URL, which is this, and I'll put it there. And this is mostly what you do. Then I'll put a comma. Then I'll put my callback function over here, which is a callback function containing the data that has been returned. Then I execute the callback function here. So you don't need the word URL. It's just URL like that. So it knows it's a URL. So you don't need to specify the URL because it's not an object. So for the function over here, I can copy the exact code that I have here, and it will be able to work just fine. So I'll have it like that. Same logic. If I mask this one out, it should be able to work the exact same way. So I come back here, execute it, run it. You can see, did I miss something here? I should have gotten just a minute. That should have worked. Just a second. Yeah, the results are coming in. That's fine. So results is blank. Then that's strange. That should have worked. Yeah, that should have worked. I don't know why. Hmm, should be. what I'll do, let me console.log results. Ideally, this should work. Go to my console. Oh, for each is not a function. Well, get will get your string. So if you wanted to return it to a JSON, so what I could do here, I could say for this to work, I could say data equals JSON dot pass data. So I'm simply using the JSON object and I'm passing this data to a JSON object. Then now it becomes a JSON object and that should be able to work. Now that's one way of fixing that issue. Let me see. So you can see that works. So you can pass the JSON object because this get method expects a string, but the data comes as a JSON object which is treated as a string. That's why this particular statement has allowed me to fix that error. As opposed to here, I see the data type is JSON, so it was JSON. Now, if I want to use JSON directly without using this thing over here, then I'll simply say get JSON. That's another shorthand. Now with that get JSON, then I don't need to pass it down here. So with get JSON, it will just get the data, convert it into JSON, which means it will just do this for me automatically. Then I don't need to do anything extra. So let me see. And as you can see, that also works. Okay, so I think it will depend on what you consider easy. Either using get, then you pass the JSON object here, or you use get JSON, then you don't need to pass it down here. It will be converted into JSON already as you are moving along. Mpaka hapo tuko sawa? Njeru?
Niko sawa. Niko sawa.
Good. So that's get.
Yeah.
We say we have two methods. We have get and we have post. So let's see how we can be able to use post. Now, post is when you want to send data over to the server. And by the way, you can still use the exact same um, uh, method. But then now the problem is my API, this particular API that I've written, cannot use post. This one can only use get. This particular API doesn't use post. If I try to use post over here and I try to send, well, actually, surprisingly, it works. So we can give it a try. I didn't expect it to work because this one wouldn't have been passed as a variable. It would have gone as part of the body. Of course, that's how we construct our HTML. But for purpose of this example, let's say I wanted to add a new. Let's say I wanted to add a new type. For me to add a new type, I have for me to add a new type. Let me just get this. To add a new type, I will. Don't worry about how this code looks like. It's not what I tend to have for you. I'll have save inventory type, type ID, and type name. So I'll have these three values: save inventory, type ID, and type name. So if I provide those three things, then I should be able to check whatever has been added afresh. So let's see how we can be able to add that data. So using post. So to use post, again, I can use jQuery.ajax. I'll use the URL, which is up to this point. So again, this expects an object. An object is value key pair. So this is URL, and this is the URL. Then we expect the method, which is post in this particular case. Then we expect the data, which will be, now what you're going to do here is before you get this data, I'm going to um, declare an object here. I'll simply say my data or data. Let me my data is equals to, it's an object with we have operation. Actually, I'll copy it from here. I'll copy it from where here. I said do not worry about this. So I'll have my type name set to true. Type ID. So type name, I'll set it to true. Then I'll have type ID. I'll set it to 0 because 0 means I'm adding a new one. And I'll have my type name set to now. This is testing um, Ajax API. So this is the object, this is the data that we need to send over to the server so that now we are able to execute that URL. Now, we're going to look at how we are going to do this practically on the server side. I'm just showing us exactly how the methods look like. So here, what I'm going to do, this data, I can convert it to, I have, this one is an object, this one is a JavaScript object. We can't pass a JavaScript object over here. It won't work. So we have to convert this to a JSON object. So what I'm going to do, I can simply say my data equals JSON.stringify that data. So it will take that particular object and convert it into a JSON object, which is what I'm going to pass over here. Okay. So now after that, passing that data, then I'll pass my callback function, which is basically the data that comes back. Uh, let me sort something. This is a success callback. Sorry. Now I'm used to the shorthand. That's why you're seeing me struggle with the syntax and all that. So here I'll simply say if I can just console.log data. So essentially, what will happen is whenever I call this URL and I try to post the data, and I'll give it the data to post, it will check if this item exists. Then it will tell me it exists. If it does not exist, it will save it and it will give me success, right? So what we do is let's run this the first time and see what it gives us as the results. So I'll come here, I'll run this, and I'm seeing data is not defined. Well, data is not defined. So data, all right. This is my data, not data. My data. Sorry, that was my mistake. So I'll run it again. Um, this network has given me. Let me check. Well, it doesn't give me anything. So why is that? Type name is actually I missed something. I don't give it the operation to execute. Sorry, I messed. I didn't give it the operation to execute. The operation should be save. The operation should be save inventory type. That's the operation. I missed that. Should be save of that. Yeah. So save inventory type is true. Type ID is 0. Type name is that. So when I run that, it should be able to give me some sort of response. That's strange. Um, that is actually strange. Well, I'll use the shorthand instead of using Ajax. Let me use the post shorthand. So, because again, this one expects me to pass this as a body, and of course, that will not work with my URL. So, let me use the post shorthand. I don't need all this. Let me just use the post shorthand. So, for the post shorthand, similar to the get shorthand that I used here, I'll simply say jQuery.post. I'll give the URL which we have here. And by the way, these shortcuts are what I use the most. I don't use the Ajax API directly. Then for the data, I'll give the data that I have up here. I don't need to convert it. I'll do that. Then here, I'll have the success callback. Then I'll just output the callback. I'll simply say, well, actually, I think this should have, did do it on the console? No, I didn't do anything on the console. So here, I'll simply say, not on the console, let me just output on the screen. I'll say, jQuery, go to the body of the document, and the HTML that you want to put there, simply put the data that has been returned from from this particular callback. So in short, what I'm trying to do is I'm saying I want to use Ajax, but I'm using the post shorthand. This is the URL I want to post data to. Then this is the payload that I'm sending. You can split it, by the way, in 3 lines, and you don't need to specify these fields like that. Things can remain like that. So it's only the values that need to be enclosed inside brackets if they are string. Then of course we have the success callback. If you want, you can add the failure callback here, the error callback here. For now, as I said, I'm not going to handle the error callback, but you might want to add it, maybe depending on what data comes at the top over here. So for now, I'll omit the error callback, and I believe this should now be able to work. Execute it. You can see it's successful. Now, if I try to do it again, it tells me it exists. Okay. Now, let me re-enable this portion of extracting the data up here and see how it works out. You can either use this one or this one. It doesn't matter, whichever is convenient for you. I'll now mask this one so that now you are not able to run it again. So when I run this, you're able to see now I have the ones that I just added. Are you together? That is how we use the Ajax API to be able to fetch and post data remotely from our remote server. It can be a local server, it could be a server over the internet, it could be somebody else's server. It doesn't really matter. So long as we are going to be able to fetch data, then we will use the Ajax API mostly. And on the Ajax API, as I said, I'm going to use the shorthands, the get JSON, the get, and the post. I can use the Ajax request itself, and especially when I want to do things like uploading images and things like that. But that is generally how far I would go with it in this particular case. So just must how to use the post, the get JSON, and probably maybe the Ajax method itself, because then you have to specify which method you're going to use to get the data to move along.
Richard,
Yes.
there's that bit of testing. To me, it looks funny. It looks interesting, in fact.
Okay. Which particular part? Because there's the network part. Network part simply tells me exactly which data came from where. By the way, every time I'm using Ajax, it means that I'll be getting data from a remote source. So the network tab over here allows me to be able
Richard,
to get that remote data. After I execute, what payload do I send and what kind of data do I get back? So from here, I'm able to examine the data that's come back, so I can be able to see how to deal with the fields and things like that. Again, don't worry about this. We're going to look at PHP in detail, and we're going to create our own APIs. Then we're going to consume the data that comes from those particular APIs. For now, I
You are
don't want
making
us.
it look
Yes.
you are making it look so simple, but when I try to do it alone,
It's
it's
complicated.
climbing Mount Everest.
Now, once you get used to it, I know for the first time it usually looks very, very complicated, and yeah, that's basically what it is. So, what I want you to do is just use an API like where is it? Like this. Just use an API like whatever I've given you over here. It will get you the data. Then just try to look through the data and play around with it. Use get and post on this. It will work on all of them. Okay. Then once you
Mm.
understand how the API works, I'm not concerned with how this data is obtained. What I'm concerned with is when it comes back, how do I play around with it? Okay.
Okay.
That should be your focus for now. So maybe for your exercise, use this API fetch the data, play around with it. You might create a table, you might create different divs, you might create different paragraphs, you might create different divs and format them differently. It will depend on how really you want to play with the data as it comes in. So that now you are able to understand exactly when this data comes in and it's a JSON object. How do I traverse through that particular JSON object to be able to look through all the elements or maybe get certain elements and so forth and so forth. Okay?
Yeah.
Don't worry, I made sure that today's video is recorded so that now when you are trying to play around with it, at least you have somewhere you can be able to refer to. Then as we move along, we can be able to see how to get around it. Kuna swali? I know this is a mouthful, and especially if you have never used remote data before, it's a mouthful. But I guarantee you, if you understand this and you're able to work with data that comes from a remote place to your web page and you're able to manipulate it, that's basically it. That is exactly how we create applications. And I'm going to show us one. We're going to create a movie database, then we will see exactly how this works out. Okay?
All right.
Kuna swali mpaka hapa?
Hiyo iko sawa. I think Jero has left.
Onjero was left. So maybe I can post up to this point. I can share this endpoint. Actually, we call it an endpoint. You can try use it inside your page and play with it and see exactly what kind of data you get and how you can be able to manipulate that data as it comes to your page. Okay, awesome. I think today's recording is okay, so I'll stop it. Then hopefully we can proceed tomorrow. I wanted to say something else, but I know this is actually something that's quite big, so you might want to just look around it and make sure that you are getting along with it. So I'll share this, then we can be able to see how to move along with that. Okay? Okay, thanks, and see you tomorrow.